Hello, I'm Ben from Hellfire Creative, and today I'm going to talk you through the basic steps to starting a podcast. The rise of the podcast has soared over the past few years with popular casts such as the Joe Rogan Experience and TED Talks Daily, the former reaching 190 million downloads per month. That's an insane number, but it really goes to show that the format is here to stay. Podcasts can be a great marketing tool for businesses, but also growing communities. We at Hellfire Creative successfully produce our own podcast whilst also producing client podcasts on a weekly basis. It all starts with an idea, so you've decided to take the plunge and produce your own podcast. So before you tell the world your thoughts, you need to think about what your podcast is going to be about and what you want to achieve with it. Come up with a subject that you're passionate or knowledgeable about and that you want to discuss. Do you want it to be educational? Do you want it to be topical? Or is it just for fun?
This is about coffee though, mixing up coffee. But then you could bring in the biscuits.
Just make sure you know what your aim is and you'll be on the right track. Once you've done that, you need to decide on a name. Try and be creative, otherwise you'll fall into a deep hole amongst thousands of other podcasts.
How about the podcast?
It's important your name is unique, but also explains what your podcast is about. Don't call your podcast Jim's Podcast if your podcast is about jogging. Call it Jim's Jogging Podcast.
The best thing about jogging is running slower than sprinting, but faster than walking.
Next, you'll need to nail down a format. Will it be just yourself? Do you want a co-host or a guest? Do you want to record in a live environment or remotely on Zoom or Teams? How often can you get people together for a podcast? How long should an episode be? Make a plan for what you're comfortable with, but also what you think will generate interest in your podcast. So you've developed the idea for your podcast, now you need to ensure that you have the tools to make it happen, starting with equipment. You need 3 things: a laptop, a microphone, and some software to record it on. Any old laptop, PC, or even an iPad will do. As for microphones, we recommend the Rode NT USB. Once set up, make a habit of talking clearly into the microphone. This will help in keeping a clear and consistent vocal track. For software, if you're looking for a freebie, we recommend Audacity or GarageBand, both of which are easy to use. If you're willing to spend some cash, then we at Hellfire Creative love Adobe Audition. Now, we talked about preparation in our last video, and the message stays the same here. Once you've got your setup, record a 5 to 10 minute practice episode so you're comfortable with the equipment.
And that's the end of my podcast. I hope you've enjoyed the last 90 minutes. Till next time, take care. Did you press record? Fuck!
Okay, so you're ready to record your first episode. Make sure you're in a quiet environment so that you and your guest mics don't pick up any unnecessary background noise.
On this podcast, I'm trying to have a conversation, but
It also helps to have an outline and questions for you to refer to keep your flow. Don't worry if you make a mistake though, we'll fix that in the editing phase, which sits as part of the next section.
welcome to Jim's Smodcast.
So let's hit play on our chosen software and go for it. Remember to enjoy yourself. Congratulations, you recorded your first podcast and it's sounding okay, but it could sound great. So let's make it great. Here's a couple of tips on how to do so. First, let's listen back through the episode and make a note of any simple cuts needed to make the episode flow. You know, those ums, and any breaks you may have needed to make. A few simple edits here and there will really help the podcast flow. Next, it's worth boosting the levels of the audio to ensure it's even throughout and the episode is sounding crystal clear.
She said, we'll have a cup of tea, and it was quite a funny story.
Adding music to your podcast can add another layer of professionalism. As a minimum, you should have an intro and an outro, but you may want to add some background music throughout. Be aware you won't be able to add your favorite ABBA track due to licensing, but there's lots of ways to attain royalty-free tracks. Sites like Epidemic Sounds and Artlist have music you can use for a small monthly fee, or you can ask a budding musician you may know to provide you with one. Okay, now we have an excellent sounding podcast. Now it's time to get your podcast online and out to the world. The easiest way to get your podcast on platforms such as Apple or Spotify is by signing up for a podcast host. There's a lot of them out there. We recommend something like Acast, Podbean, or Buzzsprout. Podcast hosts work on a subscription basis and can cost as little as £10 a month. Their sites give you some simple instructions on how to get your podcast onto Apple, Spotify, or whatever platform you want to be on. You'll need a logo to upload to your host, which will appear on all the podcast platforms too. Again, if you're not particularly good with that sort of thing, reach out to a friend or a creative agency to give you a hand. The artwork is going to be the first thing that listeners see, so the first impressions are everything. Do try and make it as attractive as possible. And there you have it. You have mastered the podcast world and your episodes are up and available for the world to hear. Podcasts rely on consistency, so make sure you're creating regular content. Now that your podcast is up, you need to shout about it via Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all your social medias, text your friends, write a letter to your nan, whatever you use, make sure you are shouting about it. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Give us a like, subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you next time at Hellfire Creative.